Vanga Joan My name is Joan Naviyuk Kane, and I'm a writer, poet, and I'm working on some essays right now. How I first got started as a writer actually comes from outside of writing and outside of the technology of committing words to the page or to the keyboard and then the screen. It comes from my family, my culture as a King Islander, as someone from Inupiaq, which is to say it comes from the people in my community. It comes from the language that surrounds me, both in the Inupiaq language, in the King Island dialect of Inupiaq, and also in English, in the language that my mother learned, that people of my mother's generation learned as they were subject to the assimilation era policies of the federal government in the United States. Well, as a Mellon Fellow this year, I think I'm considering issues of race and ethnicity, taking this moment during COVID-19 and taking this moment during a time of reckoning in the United States to really think about the sense of interiority that language, that writing can give me, both in the process of drafting words, of revising words, of thinking about concepts of race and ethnicity, and how until very recently, I feel that my own engagement with issues of identity, of my own race, of my own ethnicity, have been so marginalized. And I'm really taking this opportunity to center questions of indigeneity, of how my visibility as an Indigenous woman, how that carries through, but also thinking about the ways in which Indigenous communities shape and inflect my thoughts, my consciousness, and my intentions when I come to the page. I also think that there's something to be said for really the community of other practitioner fellows this year, and thinking about the ways in which through our really diverse practices, we're able to slow down and take a minute to discuss and talk through how issues of race and ethnicity figure in our work. And in particular, thinking about the ways in which indigeneity and Blackness really figure and are centered and are vital to both our practice and to dismantling the systems of white supremacy that have really, I think, for so long, attempted to dominate and control the narratives and lyrical gestures that we might be making in our art. I think at this time, I'm really considering the issues of how writing and how art are necessary through challenging times. Not only, again, through the history of my family, this autobiographical history, a family history of my grandmother and her sisters having been some of the sole survivors of the 1918 flu pandemic in Cormorant in Mary's Igloo, Alaska, and how they were raised at a Catholic boarding school, a Catholic orphanage in the Seward Peninsula, and thinking about the ways in which my grandmother in that environment became fluent in many languages, including English, and also began to read and write, and to think about the values that she instilled in me about the ways in which language and art really enrich our perspective and enlarge our perspectives. I think it's one thing to consider hardship, but it's another thing to think beyond it. And I look to language and I look to art, I look to community as ways for me to think about how to support other artists, how to support other writers, but also how to continue this responsibility I have to carry through this creative consciousness and intentionality when it comes to thinking about creating art as a way to communicate with others beyond the immediate space that we share with them, a physical space, and even beyond a temporal place. And I think I'm returning to this too through some of the ways in which I'm able to think back through time and think in a nonlinear way about the ways in which some of the themes I'm focusing on in my own writing at this time are really more universal and larger and broader and deeper than the immediacy of my situation and the immediacy of the sort of day-to-day quotidian deadlines, which is to say, I feel really connected to this larger endeavor of being human and seeking out humanity and some of the positive aspects of that right now. I think my wish and my hope and my message for the world at this point in my trajectory is that, to do the best we can to seek out the ways in which, considering how experiences, again, have for so long been subsumed, been destabilized, been questioned, been ignored, been rendered invisible, that is to say, the very labor and love of our ancestors, that we remember to carry it with us and to let it guide us, that we're not alone right now, and that to look to art and to look to scholarship about race and ethnicity, to look at the kinds of communities that we can make and build and sustain, how these are really a chance for us to carry through some of the intentions of our ancestors and to make things better for future generations. I think that's one thing that I really hope, is that we can think beyond this moment and to really consider the kinds of privilege we have, but also the kinds of privilege we can build, and privilege not in a negative sense, but really think about the very richness of the world that we have, the kinds of connection we can make with each other. Well, I think one thing that's been really surprising to me about my trajectory is that that I'm here at all. I think I feel very fortunate to have been guided to a lot of opportunities, and also have been given so much freedom and flexibility to find my own path, both as a writer, as a teacher, as someone who seeks community, but I think too as a mother. And I think that is the work that I'm really grateful for, is that I'm beginning to understand now in these times, these circumstances, the kinds of invisible labor that my mother did, that my grandmother did, that my mother still does. And the things I'm teaching my sons about how to take a minute to appreciate some of the ways in which matriarchy is so much bigger and so much stronger, and really guiding in terms of our responsibilities to each other and the opportunities that it creates for us to connect. I also think that I'm surprised by my response to what I perceive as a failure or a shortcoming of time, and just sort of finishing up a book and feeling that it's riddled with inadequacies, but I'm not feeling like giving up right now. I'm feeling like thinking how maybe when it comes to the next book, when it comes to the next set of new work that I'm creating now, that I can do better, that it's not, that I'm not to be judged on where I am right now, but thinking about keeping moving and keeping going. I think if I were on a desert island, a thing that I wish I could carry with me, bring with me, is the ability to call back into mind and even into memory. The words, whether it's stories, narrative threads, certain images, sort of mysterious moments. Sometimes it's through poems I might have memorized or have been committed to me, the types of songs that my community has taught me and allowed me to hear that I might be able to carry through language and keep with me some of the thoughts and images and recollections of the world around me. And when it comes to Desert Island, I of course think about King Island, Hyperboreal, where I'm from, and the feeling of having been there and knowing that when I was there, it's not just story, but it's really the Inupiaq, the consciousness of a place and the people's relationship to it that can give me strength.